Imagine for a moment a world where rules, ethical rules, govern every single physical interaction, not just, by law, but by these really deep spiritual principles.
Yeah, and it's not just about what you do, but crucially what's going on inside.
Yeah.
Your intention, your state of mind, even who you think you're interacting with. It's quite complex.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating and honestly surprisingly detailed corner of ancient monastic discipline.
Right. Our source is an excerpt from Saṅghādisesa, 2MD, which is this incredibly detailed text outlining rules for Buddhist monks.
And our mission really is to unpack one very specific, very intricate rule. It's all about physical contact between a bhikkhu, that's a Buddhist monk, and a matugama, which means a woman.
And you'll see how these ancient texts grappled with some really complex ethical boundaries, ways that might feel, well, surprisingly relevant even now.
Okay, so where does this story, this rule actually begin?
It starts in Savatthi. The Buddha is residing at Jetavana in Anathapindika's Orama. That's the setting. And it becomes the backdrop for this specific incident that directly led to the rule we're talking about.
And the central figure is Venerable Udāyi.
That's right, Venerable Udāyi. The text actually describes his place, his dwelling in the forest, as beautiful, pleasing to look at, inspiring confidence.
It sounds pretty nice, like a central chamber, a veranda, furniture, all arranged.
Yeah, neatly arranged furniture, fresh water. It sounds quite idyllic for a monk's place, doesn't it?
It does, so people would visit.
Apparently, yes. Because it was so nice, lots of people came to see it. And one day, a Brahmin and his wife came by.
Okay, so Udāyi invites them in, just being hospitable.
Seems like it. He invites them in to look around.
Yeah.
And as he's showing them the central chamber, opening and closing windows, the text says he comes from behind the Brahmin's wife and, well, he touches her. Paramasi, her ogamagani. It means he touched her body parts. Quite directly stated.
Wow. Did the husband notice?
Apparently not right away. He chatted with Udāyi, they left, and initially the Brahmin was actually full of praise, impressed by these monks living simply in the forest.
Oh, but I bet that changed quickly.
I did. His wife told him what happened. She said Udāyi touched her body parts, just as he, meaning her husband, would.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would definitely change his tune.
Absolutely. He was enraged. His praise just turned instantly to fury. He started shouting publicly, calling the Sakyapatiya ascetics shameless, immoral liars.
He really let loose then, questioning their whole way of life.
Totally. Saying things like, how can this monk Udāyi touch my wife's body parts? Respectable women can't even visit their monasteries without being corrupted. Really angry stuff.
And other monks heard this.
Yes. They overheard him railing against them, and as was the practice, they reported it all straight to the Buddha.
So the Buddha confronts Udāyi.
He does. And Udāyi admits it. He doesn't deny the act.
What was the Buddha's reaction?
Pretty stern, as you'd expect. He admonished Udāyi, saying his action was, and this is a list, unfitting, unsuitable, improper, not like an ascetic, impermissible, not to be done.
Strong words.
Very. And he stressed a really core point. His teaching is for dispassion, not for passion. Actions like Udāyi's don't inspire confidence, especially in people still looking for the past.
Right. And this incident, this whole situation with Udāyi is where the actual rule comes from.
Exactly. This is the origin story. The Buddha then lays down the second Saṅghādisesa rule. He says, if a bhikkhu, otyanto, infatuated and with a viparinada, a lustful mind, engages in kayasasage, bodily contact with a matugama, a woman.
Okay, so infatuated, lustful mind, bodily contact with a woman.
Be it hatagaha, grasping the hand, vichigaha, grasping the hair braid, or paramasani, touching of anyatarasa, anyatarasa, agasa, any other body part. It is a Saṅghādisesa offense.
Wow. That's specific, and what's amazing is how they then define all those terms, right, to avoid any wiggle room.
Precisely. It's not just any touch. It has to come from that specific internal state. The definitions are crucial.
So let's break those down. First, infatuated, otanto. What does that really mean here?
It's defined as being attached, having a bound mind. It's not just a passing thought. It clearly implies a real sense of lust or strong desire.
Okay. And the next one, lustful mind, vipariyata.
Well, it can mean generally a corrupted or deluded mind, but here, in this context, the text nails it down. Pratasita, a mind reddened with passion, with lust.
Reddened with passion, that's vivid. So again, very focused on the internal state.
Exactly. It's as much about the mind as the action.
And woman, matugamo, Seems straightforward, but they define it too.
They do, specifically a human female, and they explicitly say what it doesn't include. Female demons, yakini, female ghosts, viri, or female animals, hirachanagara. Only human females.
Okay, that makes sense. But you mentioned something surprising.
Yeah, this is where it gets really strict. The definition does include tarochapi daraka, a newborn baby girl.
A newborn wait.
The text adds, pag iva mahadari, much more so an adult woman. It seems less about potential harm to the baby and more about setting an absolute baseline for the monk's detachment, like 0 exceptions, even symbolically.
Wow. Okay, that is strict. And the act itself, to engage in bodily contact, kaya-sasaga samapajaya.
Yeah, that phrase signifies intentional physical interaction. It's not about accidentally bumping into someone. It has to be a deliberate engagement.
Got it. And the types of contact mentioned? Grasping the hand, the hair braid.
They define those too, with incredible precision. Halakkāda, grasping the hand, is specifically defined as from the elbow down to the tips of the nails.
From the elbow down, okay.
And Vikaha, grasping the hair braid, isn't just hair. It could be pure hair, or hair mixed with thread, flowers, gold, silver, pearls, or gems. Anything woven into it counts.
They really covered all the bases there. And aga is just any other body part.
Any other part, yeah, besides the hand or the braid. But the real, wow moment in terms of detail is how they define touching, Parvasani.
You said there were 12 ways.
12 distinct ways of touching. It's like legal scholars drafting legislation, trying to foresee every possible interpretation or loophole. It's amazing.
12. Okay, let's hear some of these. What kind of distinctions are they making?
Well, there's amasana, which is just described as mere touching, simple contact.
Okay.
But then there's paramasana, which is different and implies moving it around. So not just static contact.
Right, okay. More active.
Exactly. And it goes on, omasana, lowering it, masana, raising it up.
Lowering and raising, like a limb, maybe?
Presumably, yeah, or any body part. Then there's olagana, bending it down, and ulogana, which is another way of saying raising it up.
2 ways of raising it up, huh?
It shows the level of scrutiny, then more active ones. Akatana, pulling it towards you. Parikatana, pulling it back or away.
Okay, pulling.
Then abhiniganchana, holding it firmly. Abhidinipita, pressing it together with something else.
Holding firmly, pressing. This is incredibly specific.
It is. And finally, gahani, which is taking or grasping, maybe overlapping with the hand braid rule, but could apply elsewhere. And chupana, which is just translated as simply touching, maybe similar to the first one, but distinct enough to list separately.
That list, it's just astonishingly thorough. It makes it clear this isn't just about, avoiding major transgressions. It's about the slightest physical interaction fueled by lust.
Precisely. It's an extreme preventative strategy aiming to cut off any physical manifestation of that lustful intention.
So, given all that precision about the act and the person involved, how did they handle the consequences? The penalties must have been just as detailed.
They were. There are 3 main levels of offense laid out in the text.
Okay, what are they?
The most serious is SAЭGHÀDISESA. This requires a formal meeting of the Sangha, the whole monastic community, to resolve. It's a big deal.
Right, SAЭGHÀDISESA. The name of the rule itself.
Exactly. Then there's thullaccaya. It's a grave offense, serious, but not requiring the full Sangha procedure in the same way. Still significant, though.
Okay, grave offense. And the third?
Dukkaṭa. This is considered a minor offense or wrongdoing.
Got it. Saṅghādisesa, thullaccaya, dukkaṭa, serious, grave, minor. So the core offense we talked about, lustful monk, knows it's a woman, any of those 12 touches. That's a Saṅghādisesa.
Correct. That specific combination, lustful intent, correct perception, human woman, direct bodily contact, triggers the most severe penalty, the Saṅghādisesa.
But you mentioned perception earlier. How does that change things? This is where it gets really interesting.
It's critical. It dramatically alters the penalty, even if the monk's mind is lustful. So say it is a woman, but the monk is famatiko. He's doubtful, unsure if it's a woman.
Okay.
Or if he mistakenly believes she's a pitaka, a eunuch, or purisa, a man, or even Theravada, an animal.
Even if he's completely wrong, but that's his perception.
Yes. If he's lustful, but has that mistaken perception or doubt, the offense drops from Saṅghādisesa down to thullaccaya.
Wow. That really highlights the mental aspect. It's almost like an early form of considering mens rea, the guilty mind, in law. What does that focus tell you?
It tells you that for them, spiritual purity wasn't just about the physical act. The internal state, the clarity, the intention, the perception was paramount. True fault, it seems, lay in the fully conscious, lustful intent directed correctly. If there's doubt or misperception, the community sees it differently, maybe as less complete in the offense.
That makes sense. So what about other scenarios, like if it actually is a eunuch?
Okay, if it is a eunuch, and the monk perceives them as a eunuch and is lustful, that's a thullaccaya.
Right. Less severe than touching a woman perceived as a woman.
But if it is a eunuch, and the monk is doubtful or perceives them wrongly, as a man, an animal, or even a woman while still being lustful, it drops further to a dukkaṭa.
Down to a minor offense, just based on that mismatch of reality and perception, even with lust present.
Yeah.
Fascinating. What about men or animals?
If it's actually a man, puriso, or an animal, virtanagato, and the monk is lustful, it's always a dukkaṭa, regardless of how the monk perceives them.
Always minor in those cases, if lustful. Okay. This system is incredibly layered.
It really is, and it even accounts for touching multiple people at once. They call it thullaccaya.
Multiple people, how does that work?
So, if a monk, lustful and perceiving them as women, touches two women simultaneously with body-to-body contact.
He gets 2 Saṅghādisesas.
Exactly. 2 offenses. The penalty applies per person touched under those conditions.
And what if it's a mix, like a woman and a eunuch?
If he touches a woman and a eunuch, perceiving them both as women, and he's lustful, it's a Saṅghādisa for the contact with the woman and a dukkaṭa for the contact with the eunuch.
Based on who they actually are, even if his perception was wrong for the eunuch.
Correct. The text goes through various combinations like this, each with precisely calculated penalties. It shows an incredible effort to anticipate every possible situation.
It really does. And it doesn't stop at direct body-to-body contact, does it? What about clothing or objects?
Right. It extends to indirect contact, too.
Yeah.
If the monk's body touches something, kayapaipato, something attached to the woman's body, like her clothes.
With lustful intent?
Yes. Always assuming the lustful intent for these offenses, that contact is a thullaccaya.
Okay, so indirect contact through her clothes is still a grave offense.
And same as something attached to the monk's body, maybe part of his robe, touches the woman's body directly, also a thullaccaya.
What if it's clothing to clothing?
If the monk's body-attached item touches the woman's body-attached item, it drops to a dukkaṭa.
Still an offense, but minor.
Yes. And it gets even more detached. If the monk's nisagya, something given up or discarded, like maybe his spare robe lying somewhere touches the woman's body or her attached item or even her discarded item, that's also a dukkaṭa.
Wow. Even contact between discarded items, if fueled by lust, that's comprehensive, doesn't even begin to cover it.
It truly demonstrates the extent they went to, trying to regulate any potential trigger or expression of that underlying lustful state. It seems clear that the monk's intent and, importantly, his assent are really central.
Yes, assent seems key. So what happens if the woman is the one who initiates the contact? Does that change things for the monk?
It does, depending on his reaction. Let's say a woman who is herself lustful and sees the monk as desirable touches the monk's body. The text uses the phrase savanatipayo with the intention of enjoyment or intercourse.
Okay, she initiates with that intent.
If she initiates and the monk Kayenavayamadi exerts his body, like leaning in or participating physically, and he Vasapavijanati perceives the touch, is aware of it.
And presumably he's lustful too, or does his state not matter if he participates?
The implication is usually that his lustful state, otinto, the parikata, is the baseline for these serious offenses. If he exerts his body and perceives the touch initiated by her, it's still a Saṅghādisa for him. His participation, his assent, makes him culpable.
Okay, so you can't just say she started it.
No. But if he has that lustful intention, savanatipayo is sometimes also applied to the monk's intent in commentary, and he exerts his body, but for some reason he doesn't perceive the touch. Maybe he's distracted? Then the offense drops to dukkaṭa.
Perception still matters, even then.
It does. But here's the most important part regarding assent. If the monk has matihipayo, the intention of freedom or release from that contact, he wants it to stop.
He doesn't consent, he wants out.
Exactly. If that's his intention, it is anapati, no offense whatsoever. Doesn't matter if his body exerts itself physically, maybe struggling to get away, or if he perceived the touch. His internal desire for release, for purity, overrides everything else.
That's a powerful statement about the primacy of intention. His will to be free absolves him.
It really is. The internal state is king.
And there are other general exemptions too, right? Situations where there's just no offense, anapati.
Yes, several general conditions. A monk isn't guilty if the act was asañcika, unintentional, completely accidental.
Okay, unintentional.
Or asatya, unmindful, like he wasn't paying attention at all. Or ajanantasa, ignorant, perhaps not knowing the rule, though that's complex. Or asadhyantasa, not assenting or agreeing to it, which links back to the mokatipayo idea.
Right, not agreeing. Makes sense. Any others?
Also, if the monk is umataka, insane, or kitachita, distraught, mentally disturbed, or vedana, afflicted by severe physical pain. These states are seen as compromising responsible intention.
So, allowances for extreme states. And wasn't there something about a first offender?
Yes, adikamekasa. This sometimes refers to the very first person who committed the act before the rule was formally laid down, like Udāyi in the original story. In later contexts, it might sometimes imply a sort of leniency for a first-time transgression under specific circumstances, but the primary meaning is usually the original perpetrator before the rule existed.
Okay, this framework is complex, but has these clear escape clauses based on intent and mental state. The text then gives specific examples, right, to make it really concrete.
It does. Loads of specific illustrative cases applying these principles. For instance, touching a woman out of affection like motherly, daughterly, or sisterly affection, so explicitly not lustful.
Still an offense.
Yes, but only dukkaṭa, a minor one. It shows that even non-lustful physical contact was discouraged, but not seen as a major violation like the lustful kind.
Okay. What about, say, a former wife?
Buddhist. Engaging in bodily contact with former wife, even if the specific intent isn't detailed in that line, is listed as a SAЭGHÀDISESA.
Wow, straight to the most serious offense.
It strongly suggests that any return to those past worldly attachments, especially physically, was seen as extremely problematic and a violation of the monk's renunciation.
Makes sense. What about non-human females again, or eunuchs?
Bodily contact with a lustful mind with a yakini, female demon, or a pentaka, eunuch, is a thullaccaya, a grave offense.
Consistent with the earlier definitions. And sleeping or dead women.
Lustful contact with a sutitiya, sleeping woman, is a SAЭGHÀDISESA. But with a matitiya, dead woman, it's a thullaccaya.
Interesting distinction there. Still serious, but slightly less for a dead woman.
Perhaps reflecting the lack of potential for, well, further interaction or consequence in the same way. Contact with a tirutanagatitya, female animal, or even a darujitalikaya, a wooden doll.
A wooden doll.
Yes. If done with lustful intent, it's a dukkaṭa.
So even symbolic contact, or contact with something non-sentient, if the mind is lustful, still gets flagged as a minor offense.
It seems so. It's all about policing that internal state.
What about being touched unwillingly? Like, say, in a crowd?
Good example. If a monk is sampita, pressed or crushed by many women, perhaps in a festival or crowded street, and he is unwilling and does not assent.
No assent?
Anpatita, no offense, perfectly illustrates the importance of non-assent again.
It really does. Some other examples seemed almost indirect, like shaking a bridge.
Right, lustfully shaking a sycamore bridge, or a rukai tree, or an ivy boat that a woman happens to be on. That's a dukkaṭa.
A minor offense for shaking something she's standing on, if you're lustful. Wow. But hitting her is different.
Yes. Lustfully hitting a woman with the asakunera shoulder on a path, maybe pretending it's an accident, it's a Saṅghādisesa. Direct, forceful contact.
In pulling things.
Lustfully pulling a raju rope or a dinan stick that a woman is also holding is a thullaccaya.
Grave offense for pulling a shared object.
And lustfully moving a patna, bowl, or plate away from a woman is also a thullaccaya.
Moving a plate away. Why grave? Maybe implies taking food or some interaction over resources.
Could be. The text doesn't always explain the why for the specific level, just assigns it. And here's a really unusual one.
Go on.
Lustfully raising one's foot while a woman is bowing down, perhaps in respect.
Raising your foot for her while she bows.
Yes. That act, done lustfully, is a Saṅghādisesa.
That is unexpected. It must relate to some specific cultural context of respect or interaction, making that gesture deeply inappropriate if done with lust.
It must. It shows how embedded the ethics were in even subtle physical gestures.
And finally, what if you try to touch her lustfully, but miss?
Attempting to touch, but failing to make contact. Still a dukkaṭa.
So the intention, the attempt, even if unsuccessful, is still a minor offense, like a thought crime made manifest almost.
Exactly. It shows that the desire, the move towards the act, even if thwarted, is itself considered a breach, albeit minor. All these cases together just paint this picture.
Yeah, what's the big takeaway from all these incredibly specific scenarios?
I think it's how they collectively reinforce that core principle, the absolute necessity of cultivating dispassion and avoiding any action no matter how small or indirect it seems, that could stem from or lead towards lust, especially when that lustful mind is present. It's a system built for maintaining profound internal purity, not just external appearances.
So reflecting on all this, what we've unpacked today, it's so much more than just a simple rule like don't touch.
Oh, absolutely. It's really a testament to the incredible detail and the foresight that went into crafting these ancient monastic codes.
Yeah, from that first incident with Venerable Udāyi that started it all, through the super precise definitions of things like a lustful mind or all those types of touching.
And then the different levels of offenses based on perception and intent. It all shows this deep, deep concern for maintaining spiritual purity and using these very specific behavioral guidelines to do it.
And when you think about it, that level of detail, it was clearly aimed at stopping even the tiniest deviation from that path of dispassion, wasn't it?
Exactly. It wasn't just, did you do the big bad thing? It was about the intention behind the action, the perception you had at the time, the whole context. It feels less like just a list of forbidden acts and more like a guide for constantly checking and cultivating your inner state.
Right. And diving deep into just this one rule, it gives you such a clear window into this whole comprehensive ethical system they built. Which kind of brings up a question for us, maybe for you listening. Well, in our world today, information flies around instantly, interactions are constant, often digital, things are changing so fast. What can we actually learn from looking at these ancient, incredibly detailed attempts to define and police ethical conduct?
That's a great question. Does it tell us something fundamental about that ongoing human struggle, the one between desire and discipline?
Yeah, and maybe how do our modern ethical frameworks, whether they're legal or personal or professional, how do they stack up against this kind of historical specificity when it comes to fostering real personal integrity?
It definitely gives you something to think about, the value maybe, or even the potential pitfalls of trying to regulate inner states through such detailed external rules. A lot to mull over.